Before we get into this interview, I just want to make note that this week's interview is just between myself and Representative Pierce. My co host Adrian, I believe, got lost on his way back from Philly, where he was attending the Young Democrats of America conference. Adrian, I told you to use a damn GPS. Anyway, this week on Left Pole North, we have an interview that I feel is a long time coming. This week, we were talking with North Carolina State House Representative Rodney D. Pierce. Representative Pierce represents North Carolina District 27, so that's Northampton, Halifax, and Warren counties, in the northeastern part of the state, right along the North Carolina-Virginia line. He is a native of Halifax County and grew up in Roanoke Rapids, and this is actually his first term after defeating 20-year incumbent Michael Ray. Representative Pierce is an award-winning educator and has taught many a social studies student, and has served on the North Carolina Governor's Teacher Advisory Committee. A strong advocate for affordable health care, affordable housing, fully funded education, and class mobility, Rodney Pierce has become a strong advocate and representative of the people of North Carolina District 27. He currently sits on the Appropriations, General Government Appropriations, Homeland Security, Military Affairs, and Insurance Committees in the General Assembly. Representative Pierce, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, sir. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on. Now, we, just I guess in full transparency, you and I know each other already. This isn't one of those
Yes, sir.
interviews where the person just kind of got dropped in and we just start asking them questions.
Yeah. We have history.
Yeah, so I guess for the listeners at home,
Yes, sir.
I beginning part of last year, so 2024, I saw like little job posting saying, "Hey, we're looking for a campaign manager to manage a state house primary." I'm like, "Oh, that could be cool. I've never managed a race before. That might be fun. We'll see what happens." Well, what do you know? Joined the Team Pierce campaign, and the rest is history.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right, man. I tell people all the time, I said there's no way to describe being hugged up with CJ, jumping up and down when that last precinct,
Oh yeah.
when those last numbers came in right before midnight. And I said we were just sitting there jumping up and down. We won, we won, we won. There's something I cherish for the rest of my life, man. And I so appreciate you and your work on my campaign, man. I know I'm not a day at the beach, but like I tell you all the time, man. I really appreciated your patience in working with me because there was so many things that I didn't know, going into this that you were more well versed in, and I just think we were a perfect combination because the things that you were strong in, I let you be strong in. Then the things that I was strong in, you let me be strong in.
Yeah.
So again, I appreciate you. Again, appreciate you having me on today as well.
Of course. No, I'm happy to have you on. It's this is a long time coming, I will say. It's
I agree.
working on campaigns is not easy to say the least, but it's always really nice to get the desired outcome, and then get to watch the person that you were working with, to see them go on and do great stuff in whatever office it is. It's a very rewarding thing to see, and I'm very lucky, very fortunate to have been a part of it. I guess, however, we should kind of give folks a little bit of background on you. So you, before you started to run, before you got elected, you were a teacher, middle school social studies. So I guess just tell us a little bit about what that was like, and also just kind of how you ended up going or deciding, hey, I'm no longer going to teach social studies. I'm going to go, live it, essentially.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I started teaching in 2015, November of 2015, as a middle school social studies teacher in Halifax County Schools. That's the district that I actually graduated from, as well as the district all three of my children attend. And the first year, which really wasn't a full school year, I came on in the latter part of the fall. The first year, you're just trying to survive. That's what I was always told. You're just trying to survive, trying to keep your head above water. And then the second year, you get a little bit more comfortable. So the second year that I was teaching, I started trying to learn more about the profession, learn more in terms of how to be a better teacher, look up statistics, look at data, and I'm a social studies teacher, so that's what I need to be doing anyway. And so I learned about the underfunding of public education, particularly in the northeastern part of the state. I learned about some of the state policies that, weren't necessarily equitable. They were inequitable in terms of how many kids were getting referred to, academically and intellectually gifted services or advanced placement courses, the disciplinary issues in terms of how those situations were handled, academic performance. As the father of a black son, how black boys were treated, because I used to have a lot of young men come to my class, when they would get into it with another teacher and go to Mr. Pierce's room. So I just started learning all of that stuff, and it made me more politically aware because I said to myself, well, who's in charge of these policies, these rules? And so you go to your board of education, right? You look at that, and then you go a little higher, and you go to your state level representatives, and you go to your federal. And what I learned was that the state has more to do with public education, namely funding public education in North Carolina, than the federal government does. So that's when I really started paying more attention to who are the people making these laws as it pertains to education. Who's sitting on the education K-12 committee? Who's sitting on the appropriations committee? Who are the chairs? What bills have been introduced? Things like that. And it was last year, uh, namely, actually, no, it was late 2023. I have been watching the state representative for District 27 for a while. And the reason that I jumped into the fray, so to speak, was because this guy was saying that he was a Democrat, but was voting with Republicans, damn near 90% of the time, sometimes more than members of their own party. And what really got me incensed was that he was voting to defund public education and send millions and billions of dollars to private schools for unaccountable, vouchers. And, Halifax County Schools is a Leandro district. We are one of the original plaintiffs. I was a high school sophomore when that lawsuit was filed. So, that just kind of made it, even worse. And I actually first ran for public office in 2022, ran for the Halifax County Schools Board of Education, lost that by 34 votes, finished fourth in a field of 7. Top 3 vote getters were the winners. Excuse me, lost by 33 votes. And as you know, decided to run for the state house, won by 34 votes. As we say, look at God.
Yeah, honestly though. I will say, you mentioned the Leandro case a second ago.
Yes, sir.
I know some folks might not necessarily know what exactly the Leandro case is, but I feel like it is, at least in my opinion, one of the most important court cases in recent state history, and it's still going on. So would you mind just kind of layman's terms real quick explaining it?
Yes, sir. Well, in 1994, you had 5 public school systems in North Carolina: Halifax County Schools, Hope County Schools, Cumberland, Vance, Robeson County. They sued the state of North Carolina for inequitable funding for their school systems. They were, from what I understand, they had to tax their residents at a higher than average rate to make up for the funding shortfall from the state. So they sued the state in 1994. I believe the first decision was in 1997. And they were basically saying, hey, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. The courts were basically saying, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. There is the state constitution says this is students in North Carolina have the right to a sound basic education, highly qualified teachers, highly qualified administrators, thus and so, thus and so. It actually was filed in Halifax County Superior Court originally back in 1994. So I always tell people, Leandro is associated with Hoke because that's where Robert Leandro was from. But I always associate it more with Halifax because that's where it was actually filed. and we are an original plaintiff. But I think the next decision may have been in 2002 or 2004. It was in the 2000s, if I remember correctly, and it basically was an affirmation of the earlier ruling. Then there was another ruling when that was in December. Excuse me, that was in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, and it was another affirmation of the original ruling. Governor Cooper put together a sound basic for, sound basic education for every child, basically a Leandro committee at the state level. West Ed was paid to put together a Leandro plan, and there have been just bits and pieces of that have been enacted over the past several years by the GA. It's never been fully funded. And in one of the town halls that I had earlier this year in my district, we had Larry Armstrong, who was the Halifax County Schools Board of Education attorney in 1994, and is still the board attorney now in 2025. And he said the money that has been spent towards private school vouchers in North Carolina could have fully funded the Leandro plan by now.
Jeez.
So that is the Leandro case in a nutshell. It started off as low wealth funding issue for those counties that have low wealth education funding issue, and now it's become more of a civil rights issue, because North Carolina is the only state in the country where our Declaration of Rights and our state constitution gives you the right to a free and uniform system of public schools, and it's the duty of the state to maintain that right.
Yeah. So essentially, they had the initial court case, initial ruling really in the mid 90s. And then at least twice It's been reaffirmed saying, hey, this is still the case. These kids are still entitled to this good education. Yet nothing has happened, unfortunately. At least not really. It seems like it's one of those things where just more and more money is being sent to school vouchers instead of public education.
Yeah.
Now, I will say one thing that you mentioned before on the campaign trail, and I should know I was there, is, you've talked about your area, the state, and just kind of that whole general area. You call it the neglected Northeast. So, why?
Yes, sir.
Why
Yes, sir.
that particular moniker?
Well, if you look, I'm a historian, CJ, so I got to take it back. Northeastern North Carolina, we're talking Halifax, Northampton, Warren, Bertie, Hertford, Edgecombe. These were counties that had some of the highest enslaved populations, percentage-wise, in the state, right at the cusp of the Civil War, when you go to the 1860 census. Some of the wealthiest counties in North Carolina. Warren County was the wealthiest county in North Carolina in 1860. Yes. Now today is one of the poorest. It's a tier 1 county. And then when you look at emancipation, then you go through, late 19th century, early 20th century, you see Black people in these counties literally having to fight for their rights, fight for the rights they were supposed to be given, when they acquired citizenship. You see a bevy of court cases in the mid to late 20th century being filed in this area, education rights, voting rights, property rights. I mean, all of these things, you see these, Black folks who still make up a majority in most of the counties, or at least 40-some% of the population, still fighting for, these rights, still fighting for equity. And at the same time, you're seeing the economies of these places decline over the past several decades. Manufacturing jobs are leaving. You see a lot of fast food places coming in, but you don't really see industry like that. Industry that will be transformative. Let me put it that way. You have an aging population, and this is no affront to seniors, but you have an aging population. Your population is declining. For the last 20 years, our population has been declining. All three of the counties, most of the counties are tier 1. Some of them are persistent poverty, meaning they've been, in an economically destitute state for several decades, at least 30 years. And so, as someone who lived here and literally watched this transformation happen over time, I call it neglected Northeast of North Carolina because it felt like, well, we're just like the redheaded stepchild out of the state, you know. It's like it'll be okay. They'll figure it out. And we'll just throw them a bone or toss them a little something every now and then, you know. Not anything to really transform their life or upgrade their quality of life, but something to just hold them to the next funding cycle. Then we'll toss them something else.
Yeah. Now,
So I say neglect because it feels like at times both parties have been, you know, have neglected this part of the state and taken it for granted.
yeah,
And you got all this history here. Halifax, you know, Warren County, birthplace of environmental justice. Halifax, you know, where the resolves were adopted. We love to call ourselves first in freedom. So, you know, it's like us to be such an important part of the history of this state and the country for that matter. You would think we get a little bit more love and a little bit more attention.
do you think the blame for the kind of the neglected status lies more on
Mhm.
like the state level, federal level, or maybe just like a mix?
I think it's a mix. I think it's local as well. I'm not excluding us because you know sometimes you can get in your own way. You know, the elected leadership that we've had has not always, and I'm not saying all of them, but the elected leadership that we've had on local, state, and federal levels throughout the past several decades has not always had the best interest of this part of the state in mind. You know, whether you look at their voting record, whether you look at how hard they've advocated for this part of the state, they didn't always have our best interests in mind or at heart. And now, you know, you've got, you know, over the past few years, now this area of the state is becoming, you know, in my opinion, racially gerrymandered. You know, so you're taking away the ability of people in this part of the state to elect the leaders and the leadership that they want to represent them at different levels of government when it comes to state and federal. And then sometimes you have people at local levels who may be more um, maybe more concerned with lining their own pockets and keeping their position of authority than actually mentoring younger people and letting them assume the post and the mantle to move us forward into the future. And I know that's not just you know this part of the state. I know that's you know throughout the state and throughout the country. Namely, you know you see that divide. That's not so much you know black and white. You know, it's sometimes young and old. It's sometimes a class struggle. So you have all of those things to go along with it as well.
And I mean, I agree. It's something we talked about on the show before. Is just maybe some of the older generation, the folks that have been there for a while, not making way for the younger folks who might have new fresher approaches, or just let's say ideas that were a little bit more in line with how society is currently. I will say one thing that I've always thought was kind of interesting, and I say this as someone who grew up in Western North Carolina, is demographically, the demographics are kind of different, but
you think?
a tad. But one thing they both have in common is these are two areas of the state that have been historically neglected and taken advantage of by both sides of the aisle and at all levels. And I think it's I think the fact that it is this kind of behavior, so to say, from all levels of government, the fact that that is going on is just more justification for why we need fresh leadership and younger leadership, like say a middle school social studies teacher. But
right, that's right.
yeah. Now this is your first term and everything, and session started back in July, or not July, it is July. Session started back in January. There we go. And so you've had a little over half a year at this point to kind of start to get your bearings and kind of see what's what. So what's been something you've learned or seen over over the past little bit that's kind of surprised you?
Everybody's very cordial.
Yeah.
Everybody's very cordial, very nice. Um, yeah, we have some very, very heated disagreements at times. But most of the time, what I've seen so far, everybody's, even when we disagree, people try to be cordial, you know. there may be some things said in private, but not publicly. Publicly, we give each other little slick jabs. We talking about something you said or some type of bill you're trying to introduce and get passed. And another thing that I learned that kind of surprised me was was the number of bills that we pass unanimously,
Yeah.
right? Or that you have an overwhelming number of people vote on. There have been a lot of 100 plus to zero votes, uh, that I've seen, and that's something that was surprising. The consternation, the lack of consternation. I think has kind of surprised me, Uh, and that depends on the bill.
Yeah.
It depends on what bill is being debated. Then it'll get heated, or then it might veer a little bit to into a more combative area. I've seen people get cut off. You know what I mean? In terms of, I can't remember what it's called, but uh, the someone on the other side will stand and say, I'm sorry, I can't think of it right now. I don't know if it's point of order, uh, and the speaker will recognize that person and they'll say something, and the speaker will basically, whoever is the Democrat who's talking, he'll basically, they basically have to sit down and shut up, what I mean, and stop making their point. It's all done very nice though, very professional, very cordial, but it basically is you're basically it's time for you to sit down and chill. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things I've been surprised by, because you feel like, let the person finish their point. Now, if they're not on track with their original thought and they start veering somewhere else, yeah, bring them back in, but let the person finish their original point. And I've never seen, maybe once on the other side of the aisle, someone being called out for that, and by a member of their own party, definitely not from our side, and having to sit down
Yeah.
and not talk anymore.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's fair. I will say, as someone who is a bit of a nerd and does watch a lot of the sessions, it is interesting to see just how aggressive but polite it can be at times. Let's say,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
That's a great way to put it.
yeah,
Great way to put it.
aggressive politeness. Uh,
Yeah.
going back to the whole teaching thing, I guess in a way, you taught social studies, a couple of different grades, if I'm not mistaken. I think fourth and
Yeah, everything was
11th.
middle school.
Yeah,
No, everything
no,
was middle school.
middle school. Okay,
Yeah, 6 through 8.
6 through 8.
Mhm.
That's right.
I did teach a couple of high school classes. I didn't teach high school students, but they allowed 8th graders to take those courses to get high school credit. So I taught civics and economics,
Gotcha.
and I taught world history.
So, that said, what's it like going from, teaching this stuff to living it?
Ooh, man, that's a great question. It's surreal. It's surreal. I'm very proud to be a member of the State House of Representatives, particularly coming from the classroom to the Capitol,
Hmm.
so to speak. What I love about it more than anything is that my kids that I've taught, even go, I went to an event locally, and a couple of kids I taught at the first school I taught at, they're having a child,
Oh, wow.
and I'm sitting there like, wow, they're that old, you know what I mean? They're like in their early 20s, late teens. For me to be where I'm at, and for them to be able to witness that, and to hopefully and prayerfully be encouraged by it, means everything.
Yeah.
Means everything. And to be in the same room, or to go by the office of people that I may have admired for years because of their advocacy, because of their stature in the GA. That like I said, it's surreal sometimes to meet these people in person and to know you're not just there as a constituent. Now you're there as a colleague,
Right.
and they have to respect you as such. And not, most of the time they do. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, hey, you are their colleague. You are a duly elected member, and you represent the people of your district just like they represent the people of theirs.
Yeah.
So it's surreal, man. It can be discouraging at times. It can be discouraging at times, and then it can be a whole lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, what I mean by discouraging is, the process of getting legislation passed, things like that, and then people I think sometimes people try to remind you, that, well, I've been here longer than you,
Mm,
you know what I mean? This and that, and goes back into what you were saying in terms of, people, um, I'm not gonna say hanging around too long, but people who have that veteran status,
right.
been there multiple terms, not necessarily being open minded and listening to a younger point of view,
Right.
stuff like that.
Folks who are just kind of set in their ways, really. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and we all are. We're all
Yeah.
guilty of that. I was like that when I was teaching,
Yeah.
but this is policy. This is literally dealing with people's lives. This is a totally different wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
you would just hope that people will be a little bit more open minded at times to listening to different points of view. And a lot of times we don't get that.
Now, keep in mind this might
Okay.
be the most controversial one. Might get you canceled. Not really, but what is your
Oh
go-to
wow.
cookout order?
Cookout.
Yeah.
Oh man. Ooh. We got one like 5 to 7 minutes from my house. Now you're gonna make me want to go there when I get off with you, man. Oh man. Okay, okay, hold on. All right. Cookout tray, cookout burger, ketchup, mustard, and coleslaw
Okay.
with fries. Sometimes I get the fries and the nuggets.
Mm,
Um, with Oreo shake.
nice. Okay,
Yes,
that's.
sir.
I like
Yes,
that. That's
sir.
good. That's good.
Yes, sir.
A solid tray. Solid tray. um,
Yeah. My stomach doesn't always like it later, but
that's fair.
yeah.
Well, so you know that you are running for re-election. You are going to be running
So,
in a primary against Michael Ray. I know you're going to be out on the campaign trail, but in the meantime, where can people, find you? How can they keep up with your campaign, with what you're doing in the state house, all that good
mhm.
stuff?
Well, I post on all of my social media. Uh, Pretty much, if I post on one platform, I pretty much post on all of them. And most of my posts are public, in terms of Facebook, because I'm a public figure now. So Rodney D. Pierce, Pierce. You can follow me on my personal Facebook page. Pierce for NC House District 27 is my campaign page. That's also on Facebook. At Pierce for NC House is my Twitter or X. And Pierce for NC House 27 is what I am on IG. So you can follow me on those platforms
Nice.
and keep up with my campaign or what I do day to day. The one thing I'm the most proud of, CJ, that I've heard from my constituents is that they are well informed now.
Good.
They always tell me how well informed I keep them, and that goes back to the classroom. You know, um, the Bible says, "My people perish for a lack of knowledge."
Uh,
I don't want my people to perish,
Right.
so I do my best to keep them knowledgeable and informed of what's going on. And once you get the information, you do what you want with it. You know, but being in this position when things happen, I can now, you know, use that legislative muscle to ask people directly, tell me what this is going to do. How's this going to impact House District 27?
Right.
And I can get that information,
Nice.
so, and then I share it with the people. Because that's what it's about, giving them the information so that they can make informed decisions and not uninformed or misinformed. Last thing, Pierce4NC.com. That is my website.
There we go. All
I
right.
forgot to plug.
Awesome.
Pierce4NC.com.
Representative Rodney Pierce, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you so much for coming on the show, and yeah, everyone check out all of his social media pages, his website, and if you feel so inclined, I'm sure you wouldn't mind a donation or two.
Oh yes, definitely wouldn't mind that. And thank you again for having me on the show today. I appreciate it.
Of course.